Thank you, Ray. It's great to be here, and you can get those awards at almost any Coast Guard exchange, so it's really neat to be able to do that. Well, I'd like to thank the Chamber for the invitation and the opportunity, and it is great to look around and see so many friends and colleagues. It's a special treat for me as well that to be able to travel to Toronto with two people who in this room sometimes need no introduction. In fact, our Chief of Prevention, Randy Helland, came back from retirement to serve with us, and that's a great thing. It's interesting, some of our Canadian friends who had seen Randy, who retired about 3 years ago, saw him and go, oh, back from holiday. And so I want to thank Randy for being here. And his predecessor, Captain now retired Lauren Thomas, is with us, and he is now taken on a position to really help us with our governmental affairs and his wealth of knowledge. It's great. I really have nothing important to say because I just let them say it all. And so if I have that confused look on my face, I'll just look to one of them. But it is great to be here, and I just had a couple things I wanted to share, a couple thoughts that might be instructive on three different areas that I really wanted to talk about. One is a little bit of a discussion about system efficiency, and then another discussion just briefly on our ice-breaking efforts. And I can't say ice-breaking and not do a shout-out to my good friend Wade Spurl from the Canadian Coast Guard. That is truly a seamless operation. I'll mention that again. And then maybe a topic that's obviously near and dear to our hearts, and that's ballast water. I was kidding Randy and Lauren about this earlier. If we ever really fully finish this ballast water problem, there'll be an entire cottage industry of people that don't have a job anymore because this has been almost a lifelong endeavor for some folks. And even people who have been out of the business for a while come back in, and it's almost like I remind people, this is probably not a politically correct thing to say, and since we do have some politicians here, I'll just say that up front, but that unfortunately with some of the things that we have to do with ballast water, it's an ongoing saga, but we are making progress, and I'll talk about that in just a second. First I want to talk about the system efficiency that we're really trying to work very, very closely, and it's a wonderful opportunity to have such a partner, and I'm not even sure partner is the right term, for our friends in Canada. Almost everything we do in the Coast Guard in the Great Lakes is really watermarked with Canada. Everything we do, all the different agencies we work with, we have just this incredible relationship, and it's a really trusting relationship because I think it's built on truth and transparency, and that's how I think we get to the trust that we have between our countries and the different agencies that we work with. My view is that there are some great things that we're doing. One thing, for example, is the joint verification team in Montreal, where we work with Transport Canada and the Seaways to do just a really good effort to work for ballast water and some other regulatory efforts. And this is an area where I think we can continue to build on that model of binational cooperation that ends up, you're actually helping industry in the long run. And I think that when we can help both of our governments become more efficient, as well as industry achieve some efficiencies, then that's a good thing. And that's a rich example that we want to build off of. One of the things that we've also done with an effort to do some efficiency work is invigorated the Great Lakes Waterway Forum. And we've got two specific work groups that are kind of been stood up, and we're trying to move them down the field. And as we know that nothing happens as fast as anybody wants it, but I think the fact that we've got these groups established and we've got some plans and we're working and collaboratively with all the various stakeholders, I think that's a good thing. One of the groups is really working on the redundant reporting and notification of the Great Lakes, and that's how we can find out what reporting requirements there are that both of our countries require, and see how we can find ways to reduce any kind of redundancy. That will not only help us, but obviously help industry. So we're working through that. Another part of that we're looking for has to do with the two real big regulatory schemes that we're implementing on the Great Lakes, the Maritime Transportation Security Act for the United States and the Marine Transportation Security Regulations that are from Canada. Well, those two regulatory schemes require different entities and facilities and ships to have different plans and security in place. And one of the things that we have a work group set up to try to look at those two pieces of regulation and how they actually overlap, where there are gaps, and maybe where they're actually maybe in conflict, and try to find ways to reduce all of those, reduce the gaps, try to limit the conflicts, or at least be aware of where they're in conflict and have that visibility so we know where there are differences. And then obviously where there's overlap, there'd be a great opportunity, and not only to reduce that burden on the industry, but also to try to find a way, it's in our best interest as good stewards of the public dollar, to find a way to do that in a way that's more efficient for us. No reason for both of our countries to be redundant in our efforts in the regulatory scheme. So those two work groups, both for the redundant reporting as well as the regulatory review to see how we can find ways to become more efficient, are ongoing, and I think something that will only help us and is in our, it's our requirement as good stewards of the public resource to do that, and also it's hopefully in your best interest in industry for us to be able to do that to help. I'd like to spend just a couple minutes talking about Great Lakes ice breaking. Another example of how really, for example, the U.S. Coast Guard and the Canadian Coast Guard seamlessly operate throughout this Great Lakes system. And it really does, it is a system. With the Seaway and the 5 lakes, it is a system, and when you think of it like a system, I think you get so much greater appreciation for how to be effective in managing the various resources that are operating in that. This has been a really good year. I think with regard to industry, I think has seen a welcomed uptick in activity, and that's great. In fact, we got a request from industry. The Army Corps of Engineers got a request to keep the Soo locks open for an additional 3 days, and we obviously had some concerns about that. It's been a rather chilly winter already, and the icebreakers that we've got have been working extremely hard, but decisions were made that we think we can support that effort, and sure enough, we were able to get 3 extra days, and we've gotten nothing but praise from both countries' industry representatives on the effort that the Canadian U.S. Coast Guard icebreaking fleet has put forth this year. Obviously, it is such a binational operation with regard to the St. Mary's and St. Clair rivers, for example, and in Western Erie. We have had a busy year, and there are a number of times where we worked very, very hard to try to avoid getting anyone beset in the ice for any length of time and holding up shipping. I think it's important, though, to make it very clear for everybody, for us, and obviously in this setting, the idea of ice breaking is really about facilitation of commerce. That's what you're most concerned about, and I think if we peel back the onion and be very, very, very transparent about it. But statutorily, it's really important for everybody to understand that our principal responsibility for ice breaking is to facilitate search and rescue. That is why we are, mandated to do that. And in addition, our secondary responsibility, and there is a hierarchy of this, is to help with flood relief, with the Army Corps of Engineers in our country to help with regard to flood relief. And obviously the third reason that we are committed to this mission is, in fact, the facilitation of commerce. But I think people sometimes forget, that there is a tiered approach to that. Now, speaking about tiered approach, I think it's important to mention that this past year, we went to a tiered approach in our ports to try to really lay out a better plan so everybody knows what the expectations are for our ice-breaking efforts. It's a balance for us as we work with these, not only our Canadian colleagues, but also as we work with commercial ice-breaking capabilities. So I think we've had a good run so far. Obviously, a number of ships are in layup, and we'll have a reduced activity level over the next couple months, but anticipating a breakout probably at the 25th of March, I believe. And so I think the comment I would make is, with regard to our ice-breaking efforts, we couldn't do it if we weren't as coordinated with our, not only the Canadians, but also industry. There is a daily conference call that everybody is involved in. In fact, sometimes already this year we've had twice daily calls to keep that, communication, and I think that has been a big secret to the success of the mission. One comment I would make, and we were talking about it at the table, is the recapitalization of our ice-breaking fleet. That is obviously a challenge for both our countries, and our ice-breaking tugs are indeed over 30 years old, and they are obviously showing signs of wear, let alone the age technology that they're using. But that's something that we're still waiting on, and we're trying to figure out a way to fund a service life extension program, because there's no new ships in the icebreaker locker that we can go to and get. So hopefully we'll be able to get a service life extension program for them. We've also been able to bring in an additional resource this year. The Coast Guard cutter Morro Bay came in from New London, Connecticut, and came through the Seaway, and was able to be part of that operation. In fact, was part of both of our operations, Operation Coal Shovel, and then Operational Taconite up in the Sioux. So I think that's a challenge for both of our countries to deal with. Recapitalizing the ice-breaking fleet is going to be a challenge. And the last thing I just want to just kind of touch on a little bit is the topic of ballast water, and obviously this is a huge issue here. And, I guess we could spend a whole amount of time discussing this, but the thing for me that I really want to highlight is, I've heard good things about the Ballast Water Collaborative meeting yesterday. This is an effort that the Seaways and the International Joint Commission, have created to help inform all the stakeholders that operate throughout the system, but especially the states. And I think that when we look at this, the success of Wisconsin, for example, they just recently did a feasibility determination about the IMO standard, the 100 times IMO standard, and for ballast water. And I think that they were able to actually determine it wasn't feasible. And their efforts is just an example of the success that this collaborative can have. And I think that there's still more work to be done, obviously, and I think it's great to hear that everybody is still at the table. And yes, indeed, New York is at the table, but I think that we've got more work to be done, and I think that we've got plenty of people who are committed to this in both our countries, and actually the highest levels of our government are working on this, and I think that hopefully we'll be able to, from the Coast Guard perspective, have a rule in place in the near future. Obviously, because the rule is still pending, I'm not at liberty to discuss the details of that, and I know that this is one of the things that people have said, well, I think you might have said that last year, but I realize that, and my predecessor may very well have, and but I think we are continuing to work towards that, and I think the goodwill that exists in that effort is really something valuable. In fact, I thought I saw him earlier. I just want to say thank you to Craig Middlebrook for his leadership. Craig, you're doing a great job on that, with the collaborative and everyone who's involved in that. But Craig, your leadership, anytime you can get a group together to handle ballast water as you did yesterday and finish early after 9 hours is pretty impressive. So, with that, I just want to say thank you again, and it is just a pleasure to be here with you and to see this, collegial, collaborative environment as we work together. And thank you very much. Appreciate it.